Any way you slice it, Hillary Clinton is the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination and the White House in 2016. Hillary leads all Republicans with room to spare in head-to-head matchups, and her lead is so large in the race among Democrats, she is now the biggest frontrunner in the history of several polls at this point in the process. Hillary's appeal is so widespread right now that two-thirds of all voters, regardless of party, told ABC News and the Washington Post they would consider voting for her in 2016. That includes 90% of all Democrats, 68% of all independents, and even one-third of all Republicans say they'd think about voting Hillary. And even though Clinton has not announced or even indicated she's running, there is a shadow campaign that's been built to support what some would call her inevitable campaign, chock full of longtime supporters, staffers, and even a number of heavyweights who have shifted from Team Obama to Team Hillary. All of which and more was profiled in depth in this New York Times Magazine cover story, Planet Hillary. And earlier this week, I spoke with the author of that article, Amy Chozick. Amy, your piece, Planet Hillary, gives a very detailed accounting of the infrastructure of a potential Hillary Clinton campaign for president. Was there anything in your reporting that indicated to you that she might not run for the White House in 2016?
Well, I think it's important to know that the infrastructure I describe is largely set up and the people sort of in the outer rings of the Clinton onion, if you will. So these are people who, supported her in 2008 and have never given up on the chance of her being president. And so they are starting to get all this infrastructure in place should she decide to run. So I think, she could still say that she's not running. I think everything indicates that she would run, but it's certainly not certain. And the people setting up this infrastructure are sort of not her innermost circle.
Was there any doubt on their part, on the part of the people that you talked setting up that infrastructure, that she might not run in 2016?
Well, the people who are setting up that infrastructure are doing so because they want her to run. And so they want, this big machine to be in place. Should she decide to run, they want everything sort of, pushing her to run. But they, of course, also say she has to make up her own mind. I mean, I think right now the only thing that would really stand in her way is if she decided if she had any health problems, or if she decided that, maybe I could accomplish more in sort of a bipartisan way by remaining a private citizen doing work with her family's foundation. But it certainly looks like she's running at the moment.
Amy, we've been hearing about these friends of the Clintons for more than 20 years now. First it was friends of Bill, helping him get to the White House, and then certainly as his presidency went on and on and on. And you report in great detail that she's increased the size of those circles and the people who are sort of in her orbit or in her gravitational pull, if you will. That's not necessarily a 100% positive thing for a potential White House run for Hillary, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big problem in 2008. People said there were too many cooks in the kitchen, too many kind of well-meaning nudges who would give her advice, and she sort of didn't have a filter, people said. She needed that filter to keep those voices out. At the State Department, she was able to do that, partly because it's a non-political post, but she was able to just rely on a stable of close-knit advisors, some new, some old, and sort of block out all the outside noise. And so I think that's a big question, is whether, if she runs, could she do that again in 2016? Some people I've talked to have talked about installing a quote-unquote chief listener who could kind of make all of these supporters feel heard, but block out all the noise for the candidate.
But there does stand the risk of being a lot of that noise. Has she set that one-point person yet where everything gets filtered through? Is there any indication that the problems that befell her from a message standpoint in 2008 won't be there in 2016?
I think it's really too early to tell. Some of the key players in 2008 who were largely blamed for her loss, Mark Penn, the chief strategist, Patty Solis-Doyle, the campaign manager, are no longer a part of Clinton world. So, there have been people who have left the orbit who were seen as problematic or just divisive, but I think it's still too early to tell whether she can run a functioning campaign without all the infighting that we saw in 2008.
Speaking of potentially problematic headaches from the 2008 campaign, Bill Clinton was not exactly 100% of an asset in the 2008 run. He's sort of reinvented his own image in the years since. Is any of this infrastructure organized around figuring out how to best utilize Bill Clinton in a campaign, or how to filter him, perhaps?
Well, obviously that was a big question in 2008, I think. I mean, you mentioned his comeback. He is the comeback kid. We saw in his 2012 convention speech, had a huge impact on Obama's victory. And now we're seeing him, Bill Clinton, play a major role in a lot of the 2014 midterm elections. He seems to be back on his game in terms of campaigning and the grassroots outreach with voters, who he's really second to none with. So we'll see if that carries through to whether his wife runs or not. But he certainly, when he saw her losing in 2008, sort of went off message, became some said a problem.
And Amy, is anybody that you spoke to in the process of putting this article together express concern about Bill or how to handle the former president?
I don't think so. I mean, for one, they see what he's doing now. All the big Democrats, especially in important states and Kentucky and Arkansas, they all sort of want his magic to touch their Senate and congressional races right now, because he does have that pull, whereas Obama's very controversial right now, particularly in Obamacare, and Bill Clinton can come in and win some of those particularly white working class voters that the Democrats need to hold on to. And so right now, I think people are very bullish on Bill Clinton.
Amy Chozick, the author of Planet Hillary, from the cover story of the New York Times Magazine article from a few weeks back. It is must-read material for anybody who's following a potential Hillary Clinton run. Amy, thanks very much for a few minutes. All right, well, that my taped interview with Amy Chozick from earlier this week. All of this infrastructure in place, all of this money, all of these heavyweights. Anybody at the table think that Hillary's not going to run?
That's funny.
All right.
There's always
Okay.
a possibility.
All right, I expected that. All right, so assuming that she runs, anybody think Hillary's not going to get the Democratic nomination?
That's funny too.
Nope, we're good. Silence.
It's a possibility.
Who else would it be?
We thought the same thing before
That's
Barack
true.
Obama.
That's
so you
true.
never know.
But she's off to a
That's wishful thinking.
But as Democrats,
That's wishful thinking.
Democrats
He is
do not
right.
have a history of repeating the same candidate for
Wishful
president.
thinking.
While
Wishful
Republicans-
thinking.
All right, so-
Republicans, we name the next nominee. The one that loses is the next nominee. Democrats don't have the same record.
So,
That's a very good strategy.
assuming that she gets the nomination, is she the next president of the United States?
I'll see.
Yes.
Of course.
Absolutely
I mean,
not.
I've been telling you this for months, and you've been asking me, what am I
no.
drinking in my water and
No,
my
no, I
coffee?
didn't say that. I
It's
just
a
said it might
wrap.
not be as
It's
easy.
over.
I just don't think
I
it's going to be as
resist.
easy a ride as everybody
She's
else
gonna-
might think.
I mean, given the track of the current president, his popularity, his favorability, the economy, Obamacare, and we're going to put Hillary Clinton, who aligns very much so in terms of her stance, very liberal as President Obama. We're going to put her in there to take care of the country.
Yes, we
Get
are.
out of here! No way.
Absolutely.
We're running for the hills.
You will be surprised at the percentage.
That's now without her being attacked, without her record being on full display.
If being the Washington insider might hurt her, because she is as inside an insider as anybody who's ever run.
Not only that, I mean, she's got Benghazi
Yeah.
under her belt. She's got her president. I mean, I'm sorry, her husband,
Right.
who also
Super
is
popular.
Right.
Yeah.
More
That-
popular.
That's why.
super popular because while he's not president, but
See how
once
he
he's
pivoted
back
off
in the office
Benghazi,
as
by
the
the
first man.
See how he touched on Benghazi
Yeah, I
in the
saw
movie?
it.
Absolutely.
He's got the talking points in his pocket.
Listen, the fact of the matter is, we agree a little bit. Americans have, let's face it, they have buyer's remorse as it comes to this president to a degree. And they had the opportunity to go either way, the first black president or the first woman president. And it's always been my contention that if Hillary Clinton had had another month and a half, she would have won that Democratic primary. She was fighting to come back when the clock ran out. She's the next president of the United States.
All right, we're going to take a break. Up next, more Hillary. What kind of candidate, what kind of president would she be? Stay with us.